My name is David Carroll. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Englewood Chamber. I wanted to thank Cobalt for hosting this. The pizza you were eating is from Gallo, one of our new Italian places on Broadway, so thank them very much for that. You may have noticed that the Chamber is trying to focus on three specific areas: economic growth, workforce development, and transportation. And so for us, we're very excited to have this conversation today. It fits within our economic growth focus, and we think it's a great opportunity for all the businesses here to hear what ideas are being talked about for downtown. So I just want to say thank you. I know you're not here to hear me speak, so I'll get out of the way. And are you?
I'm going to take it next.
Dan, we'll take it from there. Thank you again.
Thanks, David. So I'm Dan Poremba. I'm the Chief Redevelopment Officer for the City of Englewood. And I just want to thank David and the Chamber and Erica Zierke put in a lot of effort on this as well. You know, I joined Englewood about a year and a half ago, and working within community development. My portfolio includes some big new redevelopment things, like the redevelopment of City Center, which is kind of your typical large project focus. But one of the things we realized early on is we really had an opportunity and a need to revitalize our central business district. And we needed a mechanism to do that, because right now, unlike many of our Colorado peer cities, we absolutely have no mechanism, no platform to basically brand, market, program our commercial areas downtown. And so we did some study. The city has done a lot of studies in the past, and ironically, all of them almost unanimously focused on downtown development as a really needed thing for the city of Englewood. So we did a little consulting work last year, and unfortunately, earlier this year, we were able to land a grant from the Denver Regional Council of Governments, Dr. Cog, $200,000, which is largely going to be focused on our efforts to investigate and hopefully proceed with actually starting up a downtown development authority. So this meeting today is really kind of an initial, very informal, as you can tell, outreach effort to start that discussion. We want to see a lot of input, a lot of direction from the business community. We're going to be looking for some early champions as we continue to talk about the benefits of a downtown development authority for the city. One of the things I didn't mention is that the authority can also raise the financing to do a lot of needed public improvements downtown. But we really have a tremendous opportunity, because in many regards we have a clean slate. In many regards we've been flying below the radar in the metro area. And so now we have a chance to really capitalize on our great location and many other great attributes of the city. So today, as it relates to our grant team, which is headed up by a company called Dig Studio, our Downtown Development Authority consultants consist of Brad Siegel at Progressive Urban Management Associates and Hillary Portell of Portell Works. They're going to be doing a lot of work with the public and really guiding the overall process, which will take much of 2020 and ultimately culminate in a public election in November of next year. So we'll have Brad speak a little bit about the specifics of a downtown development authority, and both he and Hillary can also talk about it as it pertains to Englewood. And then we really have the good fortune today of having a guest speaker from Longmont, the executive director of that downtown development authority, Kimberly McKee. And Kimberly has really set the bar for what DDAs do, and we really think that Longmont can provide a model for what's possible here in Englewood. So we'll have her tell us a little bit about the lessons they've gone through, and we have some video from some of the merchants up there in Longmont and I think you'll find that their experience is very apropos to the questions that we as a community are going to be raising about a downtown development authority. And then we'll wrap up with some comments from Sean Lewis, who comes to us from Longmont and really is in a unique position of having partnered with the Downtown Development Authority, with Kimberly up there, and then really representing that partnership in terms of how the Downtown Development Authority works with the city government and the city council to achieve results that are much, much greater than what could ever be achieved by a city government on its own. So that's kind of the program for today. And as we go along, we'll try to do this conversationally, but leave room at the end for comments and questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brad.
Great. Thanks, Dan, and thanks to everyone for being here. Can you toggle, please?
Sure.
Can you advance a slide or two? So before I get going, I would like to get a sense of who's in the room. And by a show of hands, can you tell me if you're an Englewood property owner? Englewood property owner. I'm assuming commercial property owner. Englewood business owner. Maybe raise your hand twice. Yeah. City person affiliated with the city somehow. Consultant person affiliated with the consultancy. Others. How many others in the room? Okay, great. We welcome others. So I'm Brad Siegel, and I've been involved in community development, downtown development work most of my career, which is more than 30 years. I'm from Denver, grew up in Denver. I got my start in this field over 30 years ago in lower downtown at Denver. And I ran a storefront redevelopment office when lower downtown was largely vacant. And since then, in the last 26 years, our firm, we've worked all over the country. We've worked in 250 cities, 37 states, mostly downtown-focused work. And we've worked with Englewood. So that's one reason we're here, is we go back about 12, 13 years now with several assignments working with Englewood. Next slide, please. So, should we probably set those up differently? Would that, are you fine just?
Whatever you want.
You just pilot. If you're cool, just scrolling.
Yeah, whatever you like.
So the point of this, and folks in the room who are from Englewood, you guys have been well studied. There are plans about Englewood kind of stacked this high, so there's been a lot of plans. But as Dan said, one of the things that has been a consistent thread in these plans, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, there's a sense that downtown could use some refreshing. So a lot of the downtown that you see today came out of 20 years ago. Englewood was one of the first developments near a transit station. And for those of us who grew up in Denver and grew up around here, we knew the mall was here before. So Cinderella City was here, the largest mall between Kansas City and maybe in the country for about 3 weeks until another big mall was built. But it was during that whole time in the 60s and 70s when malls were the thing. The mall was taken out, transit came, and this was a first generation development of trying to integrate development with transit. And the idea of the city going into a former department store, the whole idea of putting housing near transit. 20 years ago, that was all very new. Fast forward, here we are 20 years in the future, and there's a sense that a refresh is needed, that we could be doing more with downtown. And I think also an acknowledgement from the city and your elected officials that there's limitations in Englewood. Your boundaries are fixed. So if we're going to generate property tax, sales tax, commercial viability, jobs to make the city run, should we be getting more out of downtown? And should there be sort of the next generation of development? So a lot of what we're talking about today with the Downtown Development Authority, the DDA, is to create an entity, a mechanism, a champion that would look at what's next with downtown Englewood. And then maybe different from all these other studies, it would provide a way to get stuff done. It would be an implementation mechanism. It could create financing, it could create leadership to actually get stuff done, and I'll speak to that. Next slide, please. So why now? And I talked a little bit about that, but there's a whole converging set of circumstances that make sense for this time to relook at all this stuff. So there are some property transfers that are happening in the city center area. The hospitals have either undergone recent expansions or expanding again. South Broadway is getting kind of hot. There's a new cachet with Broadway that's coming down this way. Fiscal health of the city, challenges ahead, and a need to, again, look at how do we generate and create a more vibrant tax base. And just market opportunity. Markets throughout the Denver metro area. If we characterize Englewood as a first-ring suburb, this is where a lot of new development is being attracted to now. As Denver gets increasingly expensive and a lot of the development plays are arguably at the top of market, there's a lot of opportunity in the suburbs around Denver, and Englewood sort of qualifies for that.
What is this? Could you explain what the city center is? Is that
Sure, I got a map on the next slide, so you're one step ahead of me. So the basic, let's stay where we are for a second. So anyway, this is sort of an important quote just to sort of leave with you. And again, why this DDA? Why this Downtown Development Authority? And really the thought is, do we let the market sort of dictate what's going to happen here? Or do we as a community of property owners, business owners, because the DDA would be responsive to property business owners. Do we as a community guide what happens down here? That's really the key question today, and the seed we want to leave with you. Next slide, please. So to your question, what's the geography of what we're looking at? So city center, I think when people say city center, they're really talking about the area around the transit station. So that includes Walmart, and the city hall and some of the retail. This street here, this is a Lottie, the way it's drawn here. There's no hard boundary here, but city center really is that. And then there's downtown district, which is Broadway, is of course the key corridor for downtown. And then the medical district. So in the beginning, in terms of a study area, this is not what the DDA may or may not look like in the end. We're looking at a pretty large area. We're looking at Santa Fe. This is this Kenyon down here? Is that what's going on down here?
Yes.
Yeah, Floyd, Eastman, and Downing Street is the street that's on the east side. Also the Broadway corridor. We were involved, perhaps with some of you in the room, 13 years ago. There was a business improvement district that lasted, I think, 5 or 6 years on Broadway. Was not necessarily a high function of business improvement district, but it did create some boundaries, if you will, for what the Broadway corridor looks like. Do we go south of Hamden? Don't know. There are also these industrial areas, so there's a lot. This is really, everything on this map is Englewood's commercial, industrial core. This is where most of the jobs created here are in this part of town. Most of the commerce, most of the retail sales tax is in this part of town. But certainly we're focusing on the areas that are in the redder color here. Does that answer your question, Jeff? Okay, great. So what is the Downtown Development Authority? It's an entity, it's a thing, it's sort of a quasi-governmental entity. It's created by state statute. In order to form it, the city council needs to approve it, and importantly, property owners and businesses that are in the area need to vote for it. There would be a vote, what's called a Tabor vote. Most of us in the room are familiar with Tabor. It requires approval by those affected if there's going to be any change in taxes or fees or that type of thing. So a Downtown Development Authority would create an entity that would be public-private. It would have a board that would be largely property and business owners within the district. So there's a self-governing aspect to it. And what would it do? Well, it does a few things. One, and this is what we're going to be working on over the next 5 or 6 months, and where we're looking for help and we're looking for your participation. It would be implementing what's called a plan of development. So you probably have heard of urban renewal, and urban renewal is not real it's not real popular, urban renewal. Urban renewal requires things to be blighted, and then there's eminent domain, all of that. This is not urban renewal, but it does require what's called a plan of development. So essentially a vision or a master plan for downtown, and that's what we're going to be working on over the next 5 to 6 months. The plan of development provides essentially a menu of what the DDA can do. And it provides a menu on, are there infrastructure improvements? Do we need to improve streets, drainage, lighting, those kinds of things? Landscaping, parking, I mean, these are all fair game in terms of public infrastructure. And are there development sites? Are there sites that are underutilized in that area that new development might be welcome into the area? Are there opportunities to improve existing properties and to support existing businesses? So all these things are looked at in this plan of development. And then this last item on the list is probably, there's probably two reasons to do this. Two reasons to do a DDA, a Downtown Development Authority. One is champion, leadership. You have an entity that is solely focused on downtown and looking at how to improve downtown every day. Currently, Englewood does not have that. You have the city of Englewood, and the city of Englewood, for better or worse, is interested in the whole city of Englewood. So the Downtown Development Authority, number one, creates a champion. And then number two, it creates some tools that can be very helpful to improve downtown. These tools can be directed to infrastructure, to the public realm, to new development. And the two tools, one is called tax increment financing. So that's why I brought up urban renewal earlier, because this is something you find in urban renewal too. What tax increment financing is it allows an area to benefit from the future increase in value and sales that occurs from new investments. So it doesn't raise anybody's taxes. Tax increment financing does not raise anybody's taxes. But it sets a base. Let's assume the year 2020 is a base for your DDA. And then if there's new investment, there's new development, there's new sales, that increment from the new development and sales, that increment in property and sales tax can be reinvested in the area. So it allows you to reinvest new revenue that's generated in the area. And there's a whole variety of things we're going to look at over the next 5 to 6 months to say, hey, are these things that we should potentially be looking at? Don't go yet. Because the other thing on the DDA is a mill levy. And with the consent of the property owners, you can also impose a mill levy increase on you. Now, you're all, that's not real popular. I get that. Not a lot of property owners, commercial property owners react favorably when you talk about mill levy, particularly with taxes going up. With the Gallagher Amendment in Colorado, we all know that commercial properties pay 4 times more property tax rate than residential property tax. I feel this as a tenant in Denver. I know my rent on my office space has increased the last 2 years solely because of increases in property tax. But it does allow you the opportunity to create a mill levy that's controlled within that boundary, whatever boundary you want to create. And it's controlled by the property and business owners. So we'll go back to those concepts later. We'll have time for Q&A. And then Kimberly will also show you examples of how they've been able to use this tool in Longmont. Next. So what does it do? There's a whole menu of things that a DDA can do, and these are the things we're going to be asking you over the next 5 to 6 months. That if we were going to employ this tool in downtown Englewood, can we as a community, can we benefit from any of these tools? So do we want to recruit new businesses? Do we want to improve some of the public spaces in downtown? Do we need better maintenance? Marketing and events, business support, infrastructure, public infrastructure, I would add to that list as also an important item. Next. And then this isn't new. So there are a lot of these DDAs up and down the Front Range and throughout the state of Colorado. I think in total there are 20-something DDAs, something like that. So I know our firm, we've been involved in creating these in Castle Rock, in Windsor, People's Republic of Netherlands. We put a DDA together up there about 15 years ago. And then most recently we worked with Kimberly in Longmont on the plan of development. So that DDA, you're going to learn about her DDA, it's been around for a long time. But this plan of development that I talked about, what is the DDA going to do? What are the needs of the community? It's not static. It doesn't, you don't create a plan of development in 2020 and that's it. It's updated from time to time as downtown changes and as the market changes. So that's an overview. And again, we'll have time for questions because there's probably a lot of like, what's going on, you know, in terms of what I just presented. But let's turn this over to Kimberly McKee, who is the director of the DDA in Longmont, has been in that position for
9 years.
9 years. Yes.
So thank you, Brad, very much. Thanks all for letting me come up and talk to your community. I have been in Longmont for 9 years. Before that, I was in Akron, Ohio. So Akron, Ohio is a bigger town, about 200,000 people. I've had a very interesting career in Akron, Ohio. We were begging people to stay, begging them not to leave, begging them to do something. And here, I think half of Colorado's like, yeah, I was last man in, you're done, I don't know. So it's been interesting to see unprecedented growth and lack of growth and to work in both of them. I love downtowns, and I have really realized in my lifetime that they do need some comprehensive management to thrive, and so I'm here to talk a little bit about that. The DDA tool truly is, I feel, a win-win for the business owners and the community and the city as a whole. Our DDA was founded in 1982. We do get tax increment financing as well as having a 5 mil levy on that. We're about 242 acres, 400 parcels. This is a map, I'm sorry, I forgot to include it in the presentation, but you can kind of see it's a very long linear downtown. In here would be the historic core. Over here is a much more industrial area. I don't know if they made it an L in the 80s for a reason, but it seems interesting. We do work with all of the business owners, and we get them together, and sometimes we get them together by what zone that they're in. And a lot of work goes into the historic core. There is a few different funding layers in there. Sometimes those are our biggest complainers, and then these folks over here say our time is coming, and we've been working with them, and now you see their time is coming. So sometimes you really look at how are things going to translate in different parts of the district. So what does our DDA invest in? We invest in properties, we invest in businesses, infrastructure, historic preservation. We are one of the state of Colorado creative districts, so a lot of the arts and events and things we do under the creative district and events. We do try to really, obviously your TIF dollars are generated from being able to have property taxes stay and increase, so we do really look at that. But also in DDAs you can work on the public realm, you can also work on economic vitality, and so we do try to make sure that people know downtown is a destination and what they can do while they're there. One other thing I want to talk about real quickly is we really look at comprehensive management, almost if you look at downtown as a city within a city. We feel like it has to be clean, safe, and vibrant, so some of that beautification, some of the marketing and development, business retention and attraction, and then the properties. We can go to the next, and I'll tell you, I just put in a few examples of things we did. This was the Longmont Free University. I'm not quite sure what they did there. They had some classes that you could go to. Crackpots was in this building, which was right here, which is a paint your own pottery studio, which will be 20 years old next year. Been a huge thing for our community. They purchased this building, they wanted to move in, and this was in 2011. And if you can remember, 2011 in Longmont was not great times. The recession had really hit Longmont really hard. We had almost 20% vacancy on Main Street. People were really struggling and trying to figure out what to do. So Crackpots was able to buy this building, and we developed what was called a facade improvement program, where we base it on the tax increment financing that was going to be generated as part of that project. So that was about a $300,000 project. They were able to get $40,000. But what we do is we put another lien on the property, a second lien, and so they have to hit that tax increment. So just through their regular tax increases and growth, they need to be able to recoup that $40,000 we gave them over a period of time. We check in every 3 to 4 years to make sure that they're going to do it. We make sure that we do a pretty conservative estimate. They'll more than hit it, so it becomes a grant for them. We just make sure that they don't invest in their property, then leave town and it falls and all of our investment is for nothing. So that's really how we look at something like that. And it was able to get more retail on Main Street and do some of our other goals. So then we really talked about, we did not have enough retail, and a lot of, in harder times, it seems like businesses can take your storefronts and not really restaurants or retail. So we did what we called a retail conversion grant. So if you took a non-sales generating property and made it sales generating, we partnered with our economic development council to do grants like this. So this is Georgia Boys. They started in this little shack in our district. Great barbecue. They've been featured on the Travel Channel. And then they bought that building above, which was the Hour Center, which was kind of where we did our homeless services. They moved across the street, and our grant has helped them move into this space, put in the kitchen, put in the hood. And you really talk about, well, businesses should do that on their own, but what we've been able to do is get people to upgrade what they're doing, to say, okay, you're doing that building, you know, the last one was stucco, now it's brick, it matches more to the character. So we're able to really work in the desires of the community and what we want to do in some of our incentives. Historic preservation, what we try to do is take the tools that we have and leverage other tools. So we've made portion of our district a historic district. When Tangerine came in and moved into this, not only were we able to give them incentives, that was about an $800,000 project on top of the sale of the building, but they were able to get $240,000 in tax credits, historic tax credits for what they did to that building. So we try to make sure that we can leverage all kinds of different funding options. We have an opportunity zone, we have an enterprise zone. So we try to make sure that we get other external funding to make sure it's very beneficial to the property and business owners. And streetscape enhancements. One of the things that you really do, and you know, we don't really worry about shopping malls anymore because those have now had their crime as well. But back in the day when downtown development was really important, you know, a shopping mall, you have that look and feel. Downtowns are every man for themselves, and that's fine, but sometimes that makes it not feel coherent. So by doing placemaking like banners and kiosks and flowers, really gives that sense of place, the arrival, and makes you feel like you're in one place while you're there. So those are really important. We did about a $7 million alley and breezeway project. So this is one of those breezeways. All of our parking is behind Main Street. Main Street is Highway 287, which has it's a luxury and a curse, has its own problems. But this is how we get people from our public parking into downtown. It used to have a lot of overgrown landscaping, this covering, and you would really just run as fast as you can to get from one side to the other because you never knew what was going to come out. We really tried to make sure that it was had different gathering. This is my favorite picture because it looks like utter chaos. Every human being is going a different direction in a way, but you know, you can do whatever you want in this space. So if you turn to the next one, the alleys themselves were horrible, and I had a before picture, I'm sorry I didn't make it. It had huge potholes, trash everywhere, the drainage was awful. It was not a place where you wanted to be. We were able to put in permeable pavers, underground all the utilities, do common trash enclosures, and these have really become a vibrant corridor. So right now people are not only hanging out in them, but they're walking around and they're doing some things. You can see the brickwork down there on the corner. One of the things that we did was we invested in a facade grant for those businesses. This started in 2012, and one of the things we said is you have these great alleys, but these horrible buildings to walk into, that's going to kind of be counterproductive. So we put together an incentive program using our TIF dollars, and we had about 36 properties that fixed up the back of their buildings. And when we first started this was in a time when no one was really fixing up the front of their buildings. So we've had 36 people do that. We granted $89,000 to get about $600,000 in private investment on top of the infrastructure that we did. So it's really made a different, you know, when you come, the arrival that you have is that your first impression, and it was the back of these buildings that was dirty and dingy. So we were able to really work on that. The total cost was a $7 million project for the alleys on both sides, and the DDA contributed about $2 million in some parking lot upgrades, the breezeways, and then some of the alley. Oh, sorry. So this is a before and after. This was not landscaping, this was weeds and just kind of utilities everywhere. This was an interesting one because when they did this building, one of the things that we said was a lot of our buildings are 125 feet deep, and they were able to split in half. And so the back of this became a yarn shop, and then the front was the Egyptian store, so we were able to get more retailers in there. And then fun things like this happen in your alleys. We got a bunch of grants, and we did a rally in the alley, and we had 6 different murals and different different things that are added. So this is one of the things that really adds to that sense of place. We also do events, so this culminated at one of our art walks, and what we usually try to do is partner with other organizations and have them host their events downtown. So doing that and making sure that the marketing and people know to come down and look at these things, and they know that downtown is not a one-stop destination, and I think that's where DDAs can really help as far as marketing. I think it's important to know that we are not here to market for each and every individual business. We are marketing downtown as a destination. We often talk about our wonderful businesses, but it's really to make sure that you don't want to be a one-trick pony. You don't want to be the downtown that people drive to. They go to one place they know and then they drive home. And so things like this help them explore and help really get different folks in different parts of your downtown. So Roosevelt Park Apartments was an interesting catalyst project that we started. The owner of this development assembled this land for about 10 years, and it was a old church turned biker bar turned I don't know what, a gas station is what this used to be. So we were able to work with them. It was truly, when you say a catalyst project, it was the first time anyone had tried to do market rate housing in downtown Longmont. We had a lot of affordable housing, either by design or just by this is the worst property I've ever been and you really can't pay more than this. And so we didn't know if anyone wanted to live here. It's right next to a huge park that we have that is right adjacent to our downtown, but people weren't quite going there. There was probably the nicest office building we have in downtown across the street. At the time that we announced this project, it was 60% vacant. It's just a really hard time in downtown. This was about a $21 to $22 million project. We gave a $3.5 million incentive. What we did was we wanted to make sure that we had brick, we wanted to make sure we had retail at the bottom, and it was the first parking structure we've ever had in downtown Longmont. About $1 million of that will come back through that tax increment financing. Property values have gone up so much that much more than $1 million is going to come back, but that's what that lien was on the hook for. And then they also pay us back about $900,000 for our investment in the parking. What we were able to do is say we want the bottom two kind of levels of that to be public, so we were able to add public parking to our timed parking. And we wanted the retail to be successful. And this was a time when retail was not hot. And when you do a new build, the market rates are not what you're going to charge. And what we didn't want to do is have people living there, but the bottom is vacant for 10 years and everyone says, oh, what a waste of money, that was a failure. So because we were a funder in the process, we said, you need to keep these rents market rate for 3 years. You need to be able to sure that businesses can go in there and get stabilized. It has been a huge success. It has been 100% occupied, wait list all of the time. So we were really able to prove the market when we did this. So then it was followed up by South Main Station. South Main Station, if you've been to Longmont or you were in before, does anyone remember the Butterball turkey plant? That was our gateway, this big concrete fortress of death. That was not a good look for Longmont when you first came in here. So we were able to work with a developer. They announced that they were leaving town at the end of 2011, and it was a 27-acre site. They were our largest funder by far because they had 27 acres, and the equipment they had in their buildings was millions and millions of dollars. So we took quite a dip in our tax increment financing when they left. We had a developer, we were a developer to buy this. This will be coming online the end of this month, the first building. It's 314 residential units, 10,000 square feet, and it's part of a 3-phase redevelopment. This developer has said that he would have never bought this or looked at this site if he hadn't seen the other Catalyst project that we did. So it was helpful to show that these kind of things can work in our community. And then we do a lot of small scale. This one, so this is what this building used to look like. As you can see, in bad times, you put up one sign and it doesn't work, so you put up another sign, and then you put up another sign and a banner and a sandwich board, and that's what it looked like after hard times. When you have a downtown development authority and you say, why does it matter? Why do we need one? So this building was empty, it was not for sale. Someone was working on it without permits, got in trouble, moved away. So Scott Spears, who owns Scrumptious, and he owns a lot in downtown Arvada, said, I'm going to open a store, and someone said to come here. I don't know, I just stopped by. Can you show me around? So I jumped out of my office, we walked around. I was able to tell him our vision, and at the time, our vision did not match our appearance whatsoever. And so when you have that vision that has been vetted by the community, and you say, these are what people want, and this is what they'll support, it doesn't let your downtown happen by chance. And of course, people can still do what they want. It's still going to be market driven. So you can't say we want a unicorn festival or something, and then like that might not happen. But if you have a realistic vision that's grounded in the community, things can and will happen. As part of our placemaking committee, we had developers say no one is going to want to invest in this. This is not what is needed. And so we went together and we put together some signage design standards. And we wanted to kind of clean up and make sure that the appearance of downtown really matched the historic character. We were able to put tax increment financing for incentives and able to kind of enforce that, which really just changed the way you felt and what you saw when you came through downtown Longmont. So now I'll turn it over to Dan.
We're going to try to tee up a video that Chris, our communications director, shot up in Longmont 2 weeks ago, and we had a blast doing it, talking to some of the merchants up there, and they were just all so positive about what had happened.
And the downtown area was not a vibrant place to be. It was, in fact, there was a lot of vacancies in downtown Longmont.
Back in the early 90s, we were mostly tattoo parlors and pawn shops here. Now we're, got a lot of vibrant retail and paying a lot more sales tax. And,
we have been we started out on the corner of 5th and Main, right in the heart of downtown here, 18 years ago, back in 2001. And everybody thought we were a little bit crazy because there were not a lot of things downtown at that time.
And when we were going through that transition, a lot of us, people who were business owners downtown, realized the need to have an organized effort to redevelop downtown Longmont.
And with the parking and the maintenance and the streetscape and the alleyscapes and the things, the improvements that they've made, and the decorations downtown and all the activities they do, it's just been a boom. I mean, they just do a lot of things that bring people downtown, and when people come downtown, they spend money.
Having the LDDA available has made downtown a more cohesive and a beautiful place. People's walk from their car to my business ended up being a lot more beautiful because the LDDA.
Most people, in favor of this kind of organization because they can see the value of, having an organized operation that would help us, redevelop downtown Longmont.
It's just a great partnership. It's kind of economic development. It's they help the businesses down here. The businesses then in return pay higher sales tax, which benefits the city. It's kind of a win-win how collaboratively everything works.
The LDDA has definitely been of value, and it's allowed me to focus more on my business. Then you always have someone who's advocating for the businesses, and someone who has a relationship with city council and with the visitor center, and someone kind of looking out for you.
Back in the 80s, downtown Longmont was dead after 6 o'clock. It was just, they rolled up the sidewalks. But now, there's a lot going on downtown every night.
Don't be afraid of change. Change is good. It's positive. It's just going to be great for the community to have a vibrant downtown. I think the DDA is part of why this downtown has been so great.
It's made it easier for me to focus on making my business better, and there's someone else going to city council meetings fighting for all the different things that have happened. We were able to make our business better because of it.
The DDA is just as valuable today as it was when we were, when downtown Longmont was changing. My advice would be patient, keep your eyes on the vision, and and don't look backwards, look forwards.
So those are some of our fabulous business owners. Just to add 2 more things. So Ron Cheney that you saw, he owns a business on Main Street. He lives above, so he lives and breathes. He's there all the time. And Dennis was a former mayor of ours, and he also owns the pump house, so he's seen it from both sides. And he talks a lot about sales tax. I just always like to point out, we do not get any of the increment from sales tax. That goes completely into the city's general fund. However, you know, our sales tax collections have increased by about 70% in the past 8 or 9 years. So it does help. It's a win for the city. It's a win for the business owners. It's a huge win. So, thank you for having me.
And now we have Hillary Portell to talk about all the things that she wants to tell us, and she's been a great help to us so far as we begin this exploration.
My name's Hillary. I am a practitioner and consultant in community development. A couple of things I've been involved in recently and currently that kind of relate to what Englewood is facing right now. The first project is the Lowry Redevelopment Authority Boulevard 1, large 70-acre mixed-use project at Lowry. The last phase of that project, I was on their development team for a real long time. At Boulevard 1, I headed up marketing, placemaking, public art, and mobility initiatives. All the kinds of things that really do start to inform how a place functions. I'm also a part-time executive director of the Colfax Mayfair Business Improvement District in East Denver, and that's about a 2-mile-long corridor of East Colfax Avenue with about 200 businesses. We are involved in generational, transformational change right now in a long-term area planning effort. We will be the first bus rapid transit corridor in the city of Denver. We're putting together bond-funded streetscape improvements. The economic development strategy is threefold. It starts with a new adaptive reuse program for Colfax because we want to enhance and maintain some of the funky buildings that exist there and not lose them. And then a small-scale development approach for our many, many small lots. 2/3 of them are less than 20,000 square feet. And then a transit-oriented development approach for larger lots and parcels that are near bus rapid transit stations. So mobility, parking, placemaking, growth and how to accommodate it are all big themes in the Colfax corridor right now, and similarly in the South Broadway corridor in Denver and in the future Englewood. So where do we go from here? I will be the day-to-day communications and outreach person on the consultant team. Winter and spring, starting in January, we'd like to get going on getting a downtown plan of development together, and that is a stakeholder-driven process. We hope you guys will all be involved in. The downtown plan of development will establish the overall focus of the Downtown Development Authority. It's the business plan. It is what the DDA is created to do, nothing more, nothing less. So it's a very important document. It will set forth investment projects for the next 5 years or more. It'll contain a financial analysis on TIF possibilities and a mill levy structure that works for the DDA and is a reasonable ask of property owners. It'll look at potential district overlays. Maybe there's a creative district opportunity. Maybe there's a historic part of town. We need to evaluate all of that. Policies and procedures that are aligned with the city. The DDA will be somewhat autonomous, but it's got to work in concert with the city of Englewood. And then go ahead down to the next one. If everyone is feeling like there's a good ROI for you there and you'd like to see something like this happen, we would move into the formation phase, which culminates in fall of 2020 with a mail-in ballot only to eligible voters in the downtown district, and that is commercial property owners and tenants. It is not open to the greater community of Englewood. It is you being asked, do you want to create this entity? Are you willing to absorb a small mill levy increase in exchange for this plan of development? And the process leading to that is a city ordinance, public hearing, and then the Tabor election during the the general election in November.
Would the mill levy be just for those businesses, or would it be citywide?
only for properties in the district. And by state statute, there's a maximum of 5 mils.
Is it weighted?
Is it weighted?
Is the vote weighted by the value of the property? Meaning, does the guy who has, $100,000 property have the same vote as the guy with 10 million?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One property, one vote. If you have multiple properties, you have multiple votes. If they're in the name of an LLC, different entity, for example,
What's the threshold, majority threshold to pass?
it's majority.
It's just majority.
Mhm.
Is it done by both number of properties and by value? So is it weighted both, or it's just by one property, one vote?
Mhm.
And the properties throughout the central business district that we showed on the slide.
Only the properties that fall within the final boundary area. So that's part of what we'll all determine together during the planning is what should the boundaries be?
And one of the things that goes a little bit without saying is that, we really want to involve the hospitals in the Downtown Development Authority. Not only do they have major properties that utilize a lot of services, but we really want to involve them in the community building that we're talking about, the reactivation of our downtown area. They've been somewhat isolated, and so we're hoping that the Downtown Development Authority can be a mechanism to really bring them into the discussion and the collaboration. Sorry, I cut you off in terms of next steps.
No, that's okay. Oh, well, sorry. There will be a variety of ways to stay involved. There's a sign-in sheet here today. John, you've got a few of them, right? I'm really hoping some of you will sign up for volunteering for a committee or helping me put together a small group of business owners or property owners in your part of the commercial district so that we can do some additional outreach in January and get to know more people. And then I hope you sign up for email updates as well so we can stay in touch with you and make sure that you know when the next opportunity to work together is.
And with that, I think, Sean, we have a little spot for you to provide your perspective.
We're really out of time, though, aren't we?
No, because we officially are going to 1:30.
Can I just tell you
I
how lucky you
recognize.
are to have Sean as your city manager? I was devastated when he left, so you are in such good hands. He has been a huge downtown champion, and when I was not in the room, I knew that someone was always kind of looking out for downtown and seeing that perspective, so I'm extraordinarily jealous. So I just want to let you know
Thank
you're
you for
very
that.
lucky.
And I should say that she was already engaged in this process before I
Yes.
ever came to Englewood, so that was coincidental, but I think fortuitous. I am really honored to be, the city manager here and part of this effort. But I just want to also share that I've seen a lot of models. My first career in city government was as a Main Street manager, and it was a part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, had a very heavy emphasis on historic preservation. At that point, the city was really driving the bus and making decisions and holding events, and that program, I just got to go back to see it 15 years later, and it's doing really well. But it never really had the full support of the downtown folks. Then I went to another city where it was completely 100% private sector driven. And they would have every year a retreat where they would lock the doors to the boardroom and they would say every board member has to raise $10,000 before you can leave. And it was a big call-a-thon of calling your friends and begging for money. And the city didn't really contribute much, and there was not a great partnership between. And so, but they had some success as well. It wasn't until I got to Longmont I really saw the Downtown Development Authority model, where there's really a really nice blend of the merchants and the business owners and the property owners are really involved, and there is this strong element of self-governing where you all get to have a lot of say in what that group does, and you have an independent or autonomous kind of director like Kimberly was, who, as she will testify, I would often say, go in the city manager's office and pound your fist and say, we need this, we need that, because that was her role. We as staff I was the assistant city manager there, but she had the ability to really be an advocate and a champion for downtown and be an outside voice, but still be very connected to the city and have those relationships, etc. And so, and also just have that funding mechanism. That's the other big thing. We can do a lot, together, being organized and having committees and working, and having a vision and doing good planning. But unless there's a funding mechanism, we're always going to be hamstrung. And so I think that's the other real beauty of the Downtown Development Authority model is that, even if you decide not to do the mill levy and you just do tax increment financing, over the years you really have a nice pot of money that you can use to reinvest in the community. Obviously, the mill levy, if that's something that is chosen, is something that can really kickstart that fundraising effort. But I'll just say that it's an amazing model, and I think that particularly in kind of our historic core downtown here, we're seeing, the beginning of this amazing revitalization and rebirth. But when we look broader as the core of the city, down to city center, looking at the medical district and trying to bring that whole area together as a whole to really be redeveloped and revitalized and just to be an economic powerhouse, I think that's really where we need to go, because I think it's almost begging. Some of those other areas are almost begging for that sense of we want to be organized, we want to have things that beautify and redevelop and get us together. So in closing, I'll just say, I think downtown is really, it's our history, it's our heritage, and it's also a reflection of who we are as a community. When people come to a town, a lot of times they say, where's the downtown? And that's, something that people judge you by as a community of what does the core of your city look like? And then last but not least, it's one of the highest concentrations of businesses in our entire city. So when you think about economic development, you think about how we want to grow, whether it's our tax base or we want to just grow wealth for our own residents and our own businesses, downtown and that core of the city is our best opportunity for really, growing that and becoming a community of choice. And so I hope that this is one way that we'll consider and, move forward with that goal in mind. So, thank you.
Thanks, John. So that's our pitch, our presentation, and happy to take any questions or comments. This will be a long process with more opportunities to do so, but thanks for kicking it off today in this way. So any thoughts or questions?
Just a question for you guys. Do DDAs, if they utilize tax increment financing, do they tend to utilize it in the same way as urban renewal authorities? And do they tend to do it sort of parcel by parcel, or do they create larger districts, collect TIF on a broader basis, and then use it for other large projects? Or can they do both?
They can do both. They generally do both. Unlike urban renewal, it is a district, so you start collecting increment from the entire boundary, not from individual properties.
Right.
But you can direct money either to infrastructure that benefits everybody or a project that benefits everybody. Is that accurate?
So the DDA doesn't have the ability to draw smaller parcel boundaries in which they're collecting TIF. It's sort of TIF is over the whole district, or it's not in place at all.
Right, you get TIF for the entire district.
Yeah, correct. And you need to demonstrate benefit. If you're going to provide like these signage grants or facade grants or something like that, they need to be available to everybody if they follow the criteria. And you also need to demonstrate that you benefit everybody in the district. Sometimes there's a fairness issue, particularly established businesses, who didn't get a lot of help and they've struggled and now they've prospered. Sometimes it can be, why are they getting a grant or that type of thing. So it's available to everybody, whether it's an existing business or a new one.
And we invest in properties, not particularly businesses. However, businesses often put that money into the property, so they'll get the reimbursement back and that type of thing. So, providing us the state.
Gina?
I just wanted to say that I come from a small town in Kansas that has a downtown development. And it changed our town. So it really does make a difference, and it made everything grow by leaps and bounds. Our town was dying, and it really made a difference.
I'm curious, where are you from?
Hutchinson, Kansas.
Oh, yeah. Near Wichita, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Good to hear. Well, and I'll just echo that. Longmont has been just such a great example for us. I spent some time on projects up there a good number of years back, and then was able to go back as we were starting to study case studies for what we wanted to recommend to Englewood. And man, what a dynamic, exciting place. Just to see the way that the DDA has cumulatively achieved so many little things that add up to just a place that feels great to be. And so we see that, you know, we want to try to echo that for downtown Englewood. I mean, we could make this that kind of place.
Well, and it really, I mean, Longmont really works. I was up there for work occasionally last year, and it became like, oh, good, I get to go to Longmont and Maps or the little cafe on the corner and walk the streets a little bit and shop. So it really works. And I remember being in Longmont in the 80s when I was a kid, and it was just, yeah, there was nothing that you would stop at really. So it is amazing how the whole feeling in Longmont is different now. It's very appealing.
You know, the one thing I just wanted to add is, Brad brought up all the plans that you all have been working on lately, and you may have planning fatigue. You may think I can't give my opinion one more time, but this is the plan that you should absolutely give your opinion on, have your neighbors give their opinion on in your business district, because everything is bound by what is in your plan, and the money has to be spent within where it's generated. So I will tell you, our folks across the street don't like me very well because they always come to me with this next great idea. But, you know, money is going to stay invested where it's generated. So it really is a great time for property and business owners to be able to kind of set the course of where you've already put your investment.
To that end, let me echo something Hillary mentioned. Is we are going to have a planning process. We do need volunteers, property business owners that would be willing to work with us to help shape this thing. And there's several ways to get involved. There will be a steering committee. It may meet 4 or 5 times over 6 months. So it's not the type of thing that it's a commitment, but it's not going to drain a ton of time. So there's the steering committee, and then there's also, can you help us meet some neighbors, as Hillary was mentioning. That may just be 1 or 2 meetings you help us set up. But we're hoping those of you that have a property, have a business, fight through the planning fatigue and help us craft this thing, because this is different in the sense that it'll create tools that can make a difference in this town. So I would ask you to let us know before you leave today if you're willing to help us in the process.
Or if you just want to get email updates, please just email the email address in the back there, and I'll stay in touch that way.
Can you talk a little bit more about the timelines? Like, by this point, you hope to have the votes in, or groups together?
Sure. This whole process backs up from that Tabor election, that mail ballot. So the mail ballot needs to coincide with the November election. So we're backing up from November 2020. So because we're backing up from next November, between now and roughly May, we're looking at working with the community to put together that plan of development, or the business plan that one of you called it. You called it that. Yeah. So the plan of development really is the business plan for the DDA. It'll lay out the boundaries. It'll lay out what are our objectives, what are the different things we can invest in, what we can't invest in, importantly. It'll lay out the board, governance, who's going to run this thing, how we're going to relate to the city. So the plan of development, we'll leave you alone during the holidays, but in January, bam, we're going to hit the ground running. January through May, put that together. And then this goes through a legal process. If there's a green light, I mean, because we could come together in May, and the downtown community could say, well, nice idea, but I don't know if I'm wild about it. And we'd be done. And congratulations, you'd have your 14th study. But I don't think we want to do that. I think where we want to be is in a place in May where there's enthusiasm, that people see value. People being property and business owners see value, see a return. The legal process would include going to city council. The district essentially is formed by council. And then the vote affirms the tax increment financing and any mill levy that may be associated with it. But that's a general timeline for what we're doing.
Have you already presented to council? participate on this, or?
I will address that because before I got here, I actually had some concern calls from council members, and I hadn't even been officially started as city manager, that said, we think this needs to start with the business community. Don't start with us. And so I think you have support from council, but they want to make sure that you guys as business owners and property owners are on board. And so I think, again, before I was even the city manager, was already talking to Brad and Darren and Dan about, you guys need to really start with the business owners. So they want this to start with you all, and for you guys to really have buy-in before they really, try to say, we're moving forward with this.
Seeing no further questions?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Rest adjourned.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.